Okay, this is the intro to the recording for the archive for the Friday night Bible study for the 13th day of April 2018. It's the 29th day of the first month on the Hebrew sacred calendar, and I'll do that when we get live. We're going to be streaming live on Facebook Live's Sabbath service page, and this recording will go into the archive. Let's get the Facebook Live people going with us. As soon as we get a green light, we'll be on. And greetings to those of you watching on Facebook Live on the Sabbath service page for this Friday night Bible study for the 29th day of the first month on God's holy sacred calendar, the Hebrew calendar. It's the 13th day of April 2018 on the pagan Roman calendar, and on the pagan Roman calendar it's the 13th, Friday the 13th. You know, not that any of that other than superstition really means anything, because the Roman calendar is going to be a thing of the past. Once Jesus Christ returns and ushers in and restores what God's end-time apostle often called the world tomorrow. A millennium of peace, prosperity, happiness, joy, unbridled, and with Satan, the devil, put away. A wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time. In the meantime, though, the next major event in prophecy is going to be the opening of the fifth seal, which Jesus Christ described as the worst time of trouble since the beginning of the world to this time coming as the Great Tribulation, and no, never again after. So what's coming, there's never been anything as bad. There never will be again anything as bad, thankfully. That's the good part of it. But to be the time of trouble worse than any trouble since the beginning of the world, you know, friends, brethren who tune in here, stop and think it through. If it's worse than any time of trouble before, that means it's worse than World War II, round 2 of World War. It's, of course, worse than round 1 of World War. That was actually pretty bad in and of itself. It was devastation that world leaders were just confounded over. And then to see another round of World War occur where weapons became more destructive, more means of mass destruction, even though they had the earliest part of that. It was kind of stepping stone. But, you know, that's when we saw machine guns be developed, so that instead of rifles that men would shoot one bullet at a time, you know, and have to either reload or recock, they had machine guns developed that you press the trigger and you had another guy feeding long rolls of ammunition, of bullet after bullet, that would just be fired off in a rapid succession. And then bombs that got bigger and bigger until toward the end of World War II, which helped end the war in the Pacific region, already had ended in the European region, with Germany being knocked out several months before the United States dropped atomic bombs on Japan, and in 2 places. And now what's been developed since the end of World War II, 10 years later, 10 years after World War II ended in 1945, in August of 1955, the United States tested successfully, you almost hate to use the word success with something as destructive as a hydrogen bomb is, but it tested its production of a hydrogen bomb to be much more destructive than the atomic bomb, and requires an atomic bomb to trigger it, to set it off, to make it go. Now, I'm talking about that because in the news this week there's been some pretty heavy, scary talk even between the United States and Russia especially, but the United Kingdom, and France is teaming up with the United States. It's nice to see the three sons of Joseph. You know, now Ephraim and Manasseh, they step into the shoes of Joseph. So even though they're two half-tribes and the sons of Joseph, they stand with the other sons of Joseph as if they were sons. And they hold the birthright promise. That's why the United Kingdom and the United States are much bigger and much more overall prosperous than the other tribes of the sons of Jacob, because Ephraim and Manasseh under Joseph got the birthright promise. Joseph well, let's see, Jacob and Esau had a fight between them. Joseph was a little bit too quick with the mouth, got himself in trouble with his brothers when he announced the dream he had from God, a dream from God that said, you know, he was like the sun that would outshine the rest of them. And all the brothers of Joseph hated him for that revealing that dream. And you know the story. They put him in a well. We're going to kill him except for Reuben, brother Reuben, France, modern-day France. Modern-day Reuben, being France, spoke up on behalf of Joseph and said, let's sell him into slavery. Let's get some money for him. Sell him off to slavery, you know, then we won't have that blood on our hands. But we'll just tell our father he got killed, and we'll have a little money from it. So Reuben talked the other brothers into selling Joseph off into Egyptian slavery, and slave traders came along just in the nick of time that all fit together. God worked that out. Joseph was taken to Egypt, wound up being the second next only to the Pharaoh. He wound up being second in charge of Egypt, with Pharaoh over him, and with great favor to the Pharaoh, because he was able to tell the Pharaoh what his dreams about the fat and the lean calves meant. And then was given the wisdom to suggest to Pharaoh that for the 7 lean years we set up, what do you call those big towers that you store your grains and your feed and all in? Stylos, or what you know, I'm probably not getting the name just exactly right, but that's close, I think. You know what I'm talking about. And they stored up food during the 7 lean years in such quantity that, I'm saying that backward. During the fat years, first of all, there were the fat years, and during the fat years, Egypt, under Joseph's suggestion and command, they stored up the food. Egypt did. And then when the 7 lean years came, all the people that didn't have food during those 7 years long of famine wound up coming to Joseph for it. And on behalf of Egypt, Joseph took their land and their money, and even wound up with his brothers who had put him in that well and sold him into Egyptian slavery, coming before him, not recognizing who he was, and begging for food for themselves and their father. And if you really get into the story and get emotional with it, you know, it breaks you up, the way Joseph was separated from his father, and the hurt that his father experienced and went through with those conniving, lying sons. Well, it isn't really funny, but it's, you know, it's hilarious, actually. But it's so incredible, it's almost unbelievable. But that's the way. We look at the world today, and we look at things men do to other men, and under the influence of Satan, you can really put your heart in your prayers. Thy kingdom come. Now, there's some of you been talking to me. I've been seeing your notes, and you've been talking with others on Facebook that you really believe something big is about to happen. Well, it could be. And especially when if you've looked at the news today, you see that, well, uh, the leaders are saying we're entering another phase of Cold War with Russia. Well, that's a lot better than a hot war, but a Cold War can turn at any moment, especially today, and the prophecy where God says, peace, peace, and there is no peace. So things can turn on a dime, so don't get overly laid back just because, okay, the hot is off and now we're in a Cold War. But even being in a Cold War where we were not in a Cold War for a long time, for a couple of decades, a little more than a couple of decades. Now that we're back in a Cold War and things are such as then, and Russia's already made the announcement as of March 11. I replayed that announcement Wednesday night, where President Putin, Vladimir Putin of Russia, stood on the stage of the Kremlin a week ahead of the elections and made the announcement that Russia has invincible missiles that fly at a low altitude. They fly in a stealthy way with random paths toward their path that are smart, such that the president of Russia was saying no present or future, no current or future air or missile defense system can defeat their smart, invincible missiles with hydrogen nuclear warheads that can blow up entire cities of the United States. And they let it be known they have, as of March 11 this year, they had those missiles pointed at 131 American cities. In this World Tomorrow telecast tonight, I played an excerpt from it on World Watch last night. I took out just 2 excerpts. I took out the part where Mr. Armstrong explained what would happen if just one hydrogen bomb, one missile with one hydrogen bomb were exploded, the devastation that would occur from just one hydrogen bomb, and the amount of area that would be affected by it. That's in this video for tonight. I'm about to play it just a couple of minutes. Just want to warm you up. Anybody that's still in the process of tuning in, give them a chance to sync up with us. Make sure you got your volume up. You're ready to go with God's End Time Apostle Herbert Armstrong on an extremely important program and very relative to the current news and very relevant. The other excerpt I took out, which is a second animation in this telecast. I used to work in the television studio. That was fun to help put together some of those things in the early days. And then my job became to head up the promotion department. After I asked Mr. Norman Smith, the head of the television and media department, I asked him, were we taking advantage of our contract, which I actually hadn't seen, but I just assumed that the church signed the normal, regular, standard rate and data service contract that nearly all of the television stations in the country went by at that time, that they utilized. It was provided for them, and its standard clauses included when you purchase a half hour of telecasting time, broadcasting a television program, it came with so many 30-second spots that would be aired by that station throughout the week for your weekly half-hour program, which you're not paying small change for that half hour. And so it includes a whole bunch of 30-second promos, what we would, for short, call promotions of the program, just showing little teasers of what would be in the coming week's program. All week before it shows, it's sprinkled throughout the day and the evening. The local station airing our programs would play these 30-second spots. Well, to my surprise and to everybody else's surprise, Mr. Smith said, we're going to have to check that, Stephen. We hadn't heard of that before. Well, who's signing your contract for you? Why didn't they tell you? It's right there in the wording in the standard rate and data contract. They said, Stephen, we're going to check on that. And they came back very excited and said, Stephen, you're right. Now, I was just a freshman student when I told them that. I was working 20 hours a week in the television studio as a student, but I had worked at at least three different television stations before I came to college. I'd also been through 2.5 years of military service, worked at three different television stations. And then I came in the church, applied for college, was local minister, recommended I go, and I got my mayor and a few other people to help me out because my high school grades were mediocre, and only one person on the acceptance committee was for me. All the rest of them said, no, we should reject this kid. And they said this. They said he's done everything in the world there is to do except study. Well, the lead guy on the acceptance committee, the ones that go through the applications for Ambassador College, spoke up and said just the right words for me. I love him to death to this day, and I also believe Jesus Christ and God the Father inspired the man to say this after the others were saying, look, this guy's done everything in the world there is to do except study. And, there was a reason for that. I often held 2 and sometimes 3 jobs after I'd get out of high school, and I got on the vocational program and would be let out of high school at 1 o'clock in the afternoon instead of 3 o'clock when everybody else got off, because on the vocational program, if you had a job, you could get out of school at 1 o'clock. And going from school to a job, if I couldn't do my homework while I was at school, it didn't get done, because one of my jobs, I worked, of my 2 jobs, one of them was 7 p.m. to midnight, 5 nights a week. I wasn't in the church yet. I didn't know about keeping the Sabbath in. So I'm working 25 hours a week on one job, and I don't know how many hours, almost as many hours again on a second job. And I did that all through high school and junior high, too, because my family grew up poor. And I had to pay my own way for everything. Even my summer camp, I'd have to go out and, first of all, when I was just a little toddler, I sold, a lot of kids did it. If you're as an old a geezer as I am, you got out and you sold vegetable seeds for people's gardens in the spring coming up for the summer. And what else did we sell? And flower seeds, but mainly vegetable seeds and fruit, vegetable seeds people would buy. Whatever it took. And I had a newspaper route. I had a weekly newspaper route, and then later I had a daily newspaper route. So this kid is used to work, but he didn't do homework. And without doing, I just do the homework I could do at school in class. There, that's done. Well, that was enough to get me a C. But those weren't the kind of grades they were looking for at college. They were looking for A and B plus students, and I was mediocre, mainly C's, maybe a few B minuses here and there. But I slid through high school. Plus, I didn't do the biology project where you had to do 25 bugs and paste them on these sheets, and 25 leaves off trees and paste them on these sheets and label them and what they were. I couldn't do that in class. I mean, well, maybe I could have found a few bugs at the school, but I didn't have time to do that. And I didn't realize that the instructor, that was so important to her, that even though I actually made some A's on her exams, and I averaged out a good grade in that class, except for one thing, because I didn't do the bug collection, I didn't do the leaf collection, she flunked me. I mean, flunk, F. And so I was going to have to retake biology class the next year again, and to pass, I would have had to done the bug collection and the leaf collection. Well, I had a girlfriend at the time. These were the days kids would go steady and stuff like that. I had this steady girlfriend. I met her on my newspaper route. We'd play badminton together, and next thing you know, we're going steady, and then I have a car, and then she's going to a different high school. She lived in a different part of the town that was assigned to a different high school. So my junior year, I was right on the border of the two cities that, if you're on the other side of the border, you could go to the high school where my girlfriend went. And if you were in the border where I was, just on this side of the border, you went to this other high school. Well, I went to that school where my girlfriend goes, and I said, hey, this is where I live. I'm right on the border. Can I transfer over here, this year? I only transferred for my junior year, and I went back with all my other old students my senior year and graduated from my own high school. But by doing that, they had a vocational program too. I was able to get out at 1 o'clock and go to my job, and I'd come back. I'd take a break at 3 o'clock, come back, pick up my girlfriend, drive her home, and then right back to work. But otherwise, that biology class at that high school didn't require a bug collection or leaf collection. So I was able to pass biology, and I made sure. I did make an A on that class, just for spite. But when you average an A and an F, it still comes out to be the value of about a C or maybe a D plus or even just plain D. But you got this big fat F on your record. Anyway, my grades didn't look so hot, and all the people on the acceptance committee at Ambassador College were saying, this guy's done everything in the world there is to do except study, so we can't, he's not for us. The guy who was the head of the committee spoke up to the rest of them. They did it by majority. He didn't have the final say, but he had influence, and he said, look, we need one guy like that here. And they all went for it. They all then turned around and said, yes, yes, yes. It's kind of like watching Who's Got Talent or America's Got Talent, and you get 3 or 4 yeses. Oh, wow. Well, they all, after the one guy said, we need one guy like that here. And he happened to wind up being the dean of students. And when princes came into town, and now I had worked also, one of my jobs, I'd worked for Arthur Murray Dance Studios. I went through their instructor training classes, not once. I went through it in Birmingham. I went through it in Miami, Florida, while I was in the Coast Guard. When I'd get off my Coast Guard duty, I was working at the Arthur Murray Dance Studio. And then once I got into Pasadena, I ran over there and I signed up to take both. I worked at both Arthur Murray and Fred Astaire. They were located right next door to one another. They had a long stairway, and their stairways were right next to one another, except there was a wall divider between it. You had to go all the way down the stairs, go down to the sidewalk, go out the door, and then just turn around to the next door. I mean, just wasn't 10 feet away from you, the next door, and go back up those stairs. I do lessons in the one studio, and then I had a student in the other. I'd run down those stairs, up the stairs, and do a lesson over there. But most of the time, I didn't have that many students myself. I went through the instructor training class all over again. It was 4 hours a night, 4 nights a week. And then Friday night, this studio had, this is after I'm into keeping the Sabbath, but Friday nights they had student dance parties, so they didn't have instructor training. But the other 4 nights I'd go through 4 hours of training a night. This is while I'm a student at Ambassador College, and I had all A's and B's that year. I knew I was on probation, so I made sure I was able to do my homework, work 20 hours at the television studio, and then go down to Arthur Murray and Fred Astaire. See, I was used to that. From high school, I'd work 2 and 3 jobs. So I'd go work from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at Arthur Murray, sometimes run over and work at Fred Astaire, but most of it, when we weren't teaching, we were in training. The teachers that were over us, longer than us there, when we weren't teaching and they weren't teaching, they had to be in the class instructing us, and sometimes they'd give us a step pattern. We just have to stand in front of the mirror and do it over and over again, and they teach the men the woman's part, and they teach the women the men's part. And we had to figure out, they'd teach me the woman's part, and I'd have to figure out the men's part from it. But the main thing is, men instructors are teaching women. So you need to know her part better than you know your own, in one sense, although you got to turn around after showing her part, and you got to dance your part, the man's part. But the point of that related to Ambassador College in this way. When a princess came into town, the student body president told me, the morning after we had a dance, an annual dance at the college in the student center. It has a mezzanine, and actually that wasn't Princess, that was a queen. She was up on the mezzanine floor with Mr. Armstrong and the student body president, and she singled me out to Mr. Armstrong and to the student body president and said these words. Now this actually made me sad, so I'm kind of not bragging, although I guess I kind of am in a way, but bear with me through it, because it actually made me sad when the student body president came to me and said, Stephen, the queen that was with Mr. Armstrong and me last night, she singled you out as the only person on the dance floor who knew what they were doing. I said, well, Danny, yeah, that's because, hey, look, I've worked as a dance instructor for for several years, and I've gone through instructor training classes repeatedly because I want the foundation. I would go work it hard. So when I heard that news, though, here's why I was sad. I thought that's a shame that somebody of that stature would come to Ambassador College and say none of the people down there can dance except one guy. And I thought, well, that's a shame. I got all this training on that, so I went to the student body president, the same one who, this is when I learned that I was on probation and that I had only been accepted. I already knew I was on probation. I mean, I just knew it myself, but he actually formally told me. They hadn't told me that before. If my grades weren't really up there, I wouldn't be able to come back the next year. But I knew that I just knew I needed to keep my grades up, and I wanted to in this college. And so, I did homework. And even though I worked all those hours, I still did homework. I went to the student body president and I said, look, I told him what Danny, the student body president, had told me, that the Queen told him and Mrs. Armstrong and Mr. Armstrong. And I said, that's a shame that, they would say that about us. I said, could we open up a dance class? And he said, well, who would teach it, Stephen? I said, well, they pointed me out as the only one who knew what I was doing, and I've had all this instructor training, and I've been teaching as a dance teacher, so I could do it. No, you are only, was I a freshman then? Either a freshman or sophomore, one or the other. I forget whether that was sophomore year or freshman year, but I was still in a low esteem or rank, and the student body, well, not student body president, but I just said it, what do you call that? The dean of students said to me, he quoted the scripture that says, you don't promote a man too early, or it goes to his head. And so he quoted that to me and said, no, you can't teach it. And I thought, well, I know the stuff. I'm probably the only one that could teach it around here, but fine. I'd be delighted and happy if you got a real good qualified instructor and you had the classes for everybody else. Well, next thing you know, I'm getting a call from Dan Truitt, who says, hey, the dean of students just contacted me and wanted me to know if I would, wants me to teach a dance class. Now, Dan was a year ahead of me, so I think if I was a sophomore that year when that happened, he would have been a junior. Now, if I was a freshman, he would have only been a sophomore, but he was a year ahead of me. That was enough, and he was a married student. And he was the guy that played the part of Roth in the movie version of The Sound of Music. So that was enough to the dean of students that it wouldn't go to this guy's head, to be the instructor. And so he asked Dan to teach a ballroom dance class. And so Dan called me up and said, Stephen, I know that everybody's seen me do this dance routine in the gazebo and The Sound of Music. He said, but the only training I've had has been ballet, not ballroom dancing, just ballet. And although that was a ballroom type dance in the gazebo, he said, the movie people completely choreographed that for me. I wasn't dancing on my own. I didn't make up any of those steps, or I didn't execute any of those steps from my own spontaneous thinking or anything. I didn't even know them before. They just choreographed a routine, and step by step, he and what's her name, Char something, the gal that played the part of Lisa, it was all choreographed for them, and they just went through the choreography as the movie was filmed. They said, "Steve, I know nothing about ballroom dancing. Will you help me?" I said, "Sure will, be glad to, Dan." He said, "Well, listen, since I don't know anything about it, I'm going to bring my wife, and we'll come an hour or two ahead of the class, and you teach us what we're going to teach everybody else that night and go through it." And he said, "Me and my wife, we'll stand out there and be the dancing couple, and you take the microphone and lead the class." So I kind of laughed. I said, "Well, Dean of Students didn't want me to be the head of it, but the guy he puts in charge of it decides to be in a subservient role and just be a demonstrating couple out in front with me calling all the shots and having to teach them an hour or two before the class what we would teach everybody else." It worked fine. It was great. It was great, and to me it was a service and a rather enjoyable one. But now, where are we right now, friends? We are at a pause in what was a hot issue this week, but which could turn on a dime, and which is a prophecy. And the next, you're going to hear Mr. Armstrong point this out as he says, look, if only the second animation he gives in this telecast is an example of only 15, 15, just 3 more than a dozen cities being hit with hydrogen bomb missiles. And he shows the devastation to the country. If only these 15 major cities that he announces in this telecast animation tonight, if only 15 cities are hit, he asks what would happen to the nation, and he answers it would be complete devastation to the nation. Now, 15 is vastly smaller than the number of cities that Russia has announced that it has targeted. 131. Let me see, did our closed caption get that? Yeah, I got that. I got it correct too. 131 American cities are targeted by Russia. It got it the first time, so those of you reading closed captions, you saw it when I said 131 cities are targeted by, got it correct again. I don't know if you noticed, but our closed caption encoder is nearly perfect. I mean, 97, 98%. It'll miss a word here and there if I'm not very carefully articulating. Some of you may have noticed since we've turned on this thing, I'm speaking a little bit differently instead of just maybe pouring through things like I used to sometimes. I'm trying to be careful to articulate in such a way that this closed caption encoder will, this is not pre-typed. I'm not reading anything. I'm just speaking spontaneously, and this thing is encoding what I say as I say it, and pretty soon after I say it. So those of you who asked for closed caption, I got the best we could get. All right, now I'll keep it running while Mr. Armstrong is speaking. I'm still training it to recognize Mr. Armstrong. It does fairly well, but not as good as it does where I can train with it better than, it's hard to do that with pre-recorded stuff to train the thing. So little by little, it's learning how to recognize Mr. Armstrong better and better. But I will keep it up while he's speaking. And for those of you who depend on closed caption because of your hard of hearing situation, but let's go ahead and get into Mr. Armstrong. Then he's going to explain this for himself. It's just that what I'm warming you up to is the fact that this relates more than ever to the current world news situation we're in, and the coming prophecy of the next major event in prophecy is the opening of the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, the worst time of trouble to come upon the world since the beginning of the world. And some of you that have listened to some one very high-ranking minister who used to say, Petra, some place over in the Middle East for a place of protection by God. God can protect you right at your home. Well, excuse me, if you listen to God's end-time apostle, and we are to hold fast to the truth as we were taught. And if you're a minister, God tells the ministry in Titus, a book to the ministry, in the first chapter, in the early verses, 7 through 9, he says, hold fast to what you were taught and teach as you were taught. If you're one who has the job of having to teach others, teach as you were taught. And brethren, we were taught the next major event in prophecy is the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, and that at the beginning of that fifth seal, when it opens up, one of the first things the beast is going to do that relates to this telecast tonight and hydrogen bombs is he's going to send missiles, first of all, on all of the cities of the United Kingdom. So, Brother Ephraim, you in the United Kingdom, even though you'll probably be watching, if you watch the Bible study, you'll be watching it tomorrow during the daytime. Not tomorrow, you'll be watching it during the daytime portion of the Sabbath. Because even though the date for Friday night, being the 13th day of April, will change in the morning to the 14th, because stupid man has created a calendar that changes the date and the day at midnight. But that's not the way God does it. This day that is now today since sunset, the Sabbath, is the 29th day of the first month, and it will remain the 29th day of the first month until sunset tomorrow night. So when we get up in the morning after hopefully a good night's sleep, it's still going to be the 29th day of the first month in the morning. It's still the same day in the morning as it is tonight. It's the Sabbath. It's Sabbath tonight. We call it Friday night because of the pagan Roman calendar, and going by that calendar that we have to interrelate with the world and the days named after pagan Roman gods. You know, we refer to them as Sunday, the Moon Day, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturn's Day for Saturday, which, God just called them the first day, the second day, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and the Sabbath, the seventh day being the Sabbath. And we're now at the end of the second Sabbath. Now I'm pausing because some of you who are following and doing the count like we're supposed to be doing and learning something from that count, you'll know when I say we're at the second Sabbath. Oh yeah, we're at the second Sabbath of 7 Sabbaths that we count. And then the morrow after that seventh Sabbath day of Sunday through Sabbath weeks, because we count beginning with the wave sheaf day. So that's day 1 of a 7-day week, Sunday, the wave sheaf day, through Sabbath, and that Sabbath is the first of 7 Sabbaths, the first one. Now today, after 2 weeks since the wave sheaf day, beginning tonight, we're now at the second Sabbath of the 7 Sabbaths that we count up to Pentecost, the next feast day, the next annual Sabbath day on May 20 this year. And by the way, I had a request this week from a couple of people for these little cards, folding cards. It's business card size, but it's double business card size with a fold in the middle. And when you fold it, it kind of turns into a V shape, and it'll sit up on the desk, hold itself up, and on the back side of it, on the one side, actually there's 2 front sides really, and then an inside. On one side of it, it's got the calendar for the whole year, the Roman version calendar, but on the Sabbaths, they're all shaded a different color than the rest of the days of the week. The prep day is shaded a little different color. And all of the annual Sabbaths have a dark purple background with white type. And I've got the type extra bold so that even though the whole year on the back of a business card, you say, well, it's small type. Yeah, can I see that? I've got that as bold as you can print it. I paid a designer, a text designer, to do this so that it prints cleanly and clearly. And unless you're legally blind, You got to use bifocals. Well, even if you can see this, and it fits nicely on a desk. And if somebody asks you to commit to a date, you can quickly. It not only fits on a desk, but it also will fit in a man's shirt pocket. It'll fit in the inside of your coat pocket. It'll fit very easily inside of a wallet or a purse. And I'm giving these out free, by the way. So I'm as I pitch you about it, I'm saying, look, they're free. I printed 1,000, and while the 1,000 last, I just sent out a bunch of them this week, and the week or two before that, I sent out several bunches more, but I still have plenty of these. And as long as they last, it's got the calendar for 2018 on here. The next holy day that's important to you, that's highlighted, is May 20. And I've got the weeks that precede that, the 7 weeks that we're counting as the Feast of Weeks. There are 7 Sunday through Saturday weeks, Sunday through Sabbath weeks, until Pentecost. And the morrow after, the day after the 7th Sabbath is Pentecost. And it's clearly indicated on here, May 20 this year. And the 7 Sabbaths, those Sabbaths, I've got a green color with the white type for the, a dark green and white for each of the 7 Sabbaths. So you can quickly say, hey, May 20 is the correct date. You can look at it, you can figure it out, and count the weeks. And I got another one. I dropped that on the floor, but I got another. I got several on my desk up here, on the counter below the top of this desk. You can quickly look at it and see the 7 weeks that lead up to Pentecost. And you can see they follow the wave sheaf day, and that wave sheaf day is part of the count 50. And that's made very clearly in verse 16 of Leviticus 23. Friends, this is meat in due season. We're in the middle, not in the middle, but we're in the midst. We are in the midst of the Feast of Weeks. We're counting those weeks. We're counting them down, Sabbath after Sabbath, until we get to the 7th Sabbath. We count them down, and then we say, woo, at sunset after this Sabbath begins Pentecost, which means count 50. Cost means count. Penta means 50. It's kind of said the other way. 50, it's a 50 count. It's a 50-day count. It's a Pentecost. It's a 50 count. And that's May 20. It's on our card. And then after that, we have a big break of several months. No holy days in June, no holy days in July, no holy days in August, no holy or feast days. Passover is a feast day. It's not a holy day. You can work on that day, but you do want to observe the most solemn festival of the entire year, the Passover foot washing memorial, and the drinking of the wine and the eating of the bread to represent Christ's body and his poured out blood. And that's very important to God to do it. It's so important, it's the only feast day that God has a makeup day for. And that'll be coming up for those who had a legitimate reason for missing the first Passover. That'll be coming up on the 14th of the 2nd month. Now we've got one more day in the first month. And here's a little key for you if you're trying to say, well, how do I keep track of this Hebrew calendar? If you don't have a Hebrew calendar in front of you. And and this is not a Hebrew calendar. This is the pagan Roman calendar that we have to live by. This is designed to be able to give one of these to your boss, or your school, or anywhere else where you're going to need to tell those people throughout the year, as they have to plan for somebody to work around you when you need to be off. And just give them one of these. And I'll send you more than one. If you send me you can either come to my house and pick them up. I'll give you all you want, as long as you tell me you're going to use them, or, you use them or give them to somebody else. You can come to my house. I'll hand them to you free. Now, if I'm too far away for you to drive to my house, well, you can simply send me a self-addressed stamped envelope. That's all I ask you to do. You don't have to send any money. These are free of charge. But I do ask you to send a self-addressed, pre-stamped, pre-addressed envelope. Put it inside of an envelope that you address to me. You can find our address on cogtv.org. It's on the letter. It's on the lower third down here. That's our main website, cogtv.org. On the contact page, you can find our address. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath, 1428 Virginia Road, Bessemer, Alabama. Can that thing spell Bessemer? Sure enough, it can. 35023. Just address an envelope and put an envelope inside the envelope that you address to me, and have it pre-addressed to you, back to you. And for each postage stamp you put on there, for each ounce of postage you put on there, I'll put you 7 or 8 cards in there. If you send a small envelope, I can get 8 in there for you. If you send a larger envelope, now I can only get 6 or 7 in, and I weigh them at the post office when it's a larger envelope to make sure we're not going to trip and get the mailing hung up because there wasn't enough postage on it. But if you send a small size card, these fit easily into a small, regular, what is that, a number 6, I think they call it, size envelope, just small envelope with 1 stamp on it. We'll get you 8 of these folding cards. They're plastic coated, so you can spill water on them. They're still in good shape. They're easy to read because the plastic coating makes the print really stand out nicely. And I've got the times we do the World Watch program on the other side of the card, and then on this back side I've got the calendar for 2018 with all the holy days darkened in purple, and the days in between the first day of Feast of Tabernacles and the last great day, I've got them all shaded blue so you can show your boss that's the week I need to take my vacation. That whole week, that colored shaded area there, I need to be off that. We've got the days of unleavened bread shaded in yellow. I keep this code going from year to year so that you can see within the Feast of Weeks which of those days are the days you are not eating unleavened bread, that you should not have unleavened bread in your quarters, in your living space, in your house. And so if you'd like one of these, they're real nice. And on the inside, now, on the outside, you got the calendar on one side, and you got the times for World Watch, current day's news related to the Bible and prophecy on the other side. On the inside, and you could flip it around, fold it the other way once that calendar on the back runs out at the end of 2018. We've got the next 7 years of holy days cited here for you, and very carefully checked against numerous sources with numerous people helping check them. And you've got the holy day dates for all of the feast days and Passover, all the feast days and holy days from the year 2018 through 7 years later through 2024, and God help us if we're still here in 2024. But if God wants to delay it because of some reason, because he's got a lot of love for some who aren't making it, I'll be amazed, because I think, he's given us, since Mr. Armstrong died, he's given us more than 30 years now to get our acts together. It's amazing how one thing it seems like people and ministers haven't learned. Division, the things ministers are doing that continue division among us. We're scattered, and people you need to set that forward with people. Oh, and friends, I changed something. I'm going to put it off till next Sabbath. I just thought of it. I took on an extra project this week, and I had told you that we would play the audio that I have with Mr. Armstrong. I told you we'd play it tonight. I'm going to ask you to forgive me and let me postpone that to next Friday night. I have the audio from 1956 when Mr. Armstrong asked everybody to please not say you are a member of the Radio Church of God. Same principle holds, and he also did expressly and explicitly say the same thing about the Worldwide Church of God in the early or mid-'80s. He said the same thing. I was in the auditorium, the Ambassador Auditorium, when he played a little trick on everybody. He got a little more adventuresome with it in 1980 than he had been in 1956 when he just asked brethren, are you telling people you're a member of the Radio Church of God? He says, don't do that. Tell them you're a member of the Church of God. And if you have to make a distinction because of, he said, we had to make a distinction for legal purposes. We couldn't just say the Church of God on our legal holdings and assets and things, because a group in Anderson, Indiana already legally had the name simply Church of God. So he said, in order to be able to have Church of God in our legal name, we had to add an adjective to it. We had to add a banana peeling to it, a wrapper around it, a modifier. Your grammar people say that the adjective is the banana peeling of the parts of speech. And so that's why, and because we have over 600 adjectives now associated with the words Church of God. We got the ABC Church of God, the blank, 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 blankety blank this, blankety blank that, all the way through XYZ Church of God groups. And when I mentioned that to one minister, he said, Steve, there's over 1,000 now if you count all the little groups. That's hard to believe, brethren. That is absolutely hard to believe. When Mr. Armstrong used to complain about the many denominations of the Protestant world, I mean, you could almost count them on your hand. There weren't seemingly more than a dozen. You got Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, Catholics, and then you got, split-offs of that. You got the First Baptist and the Second Baptist, and but not as many as God's church has split into in terms of division and confusing people with denominations, when God's end-time apostle said, don't do that. And don't call yourself a member of a denomination. He explained it very clearly. I'm going to play his own words for you. I'm sorry I goofed up about tonight, if you were wanting to tune in for that. But pray about it so that when you hear it, you won't get angry at God. If you get angry at me, I don't care. Well, I do, but I mean, if you get angry at me, I'm not the one that created that. I'm just teaching as I was taught. And God's end-time apostle taught us that and reminded us we're not baptized into any denomination. And he chided people when he told them to put your hands down. All of you who raised your hand and said, saying, when he asked, how many of you are members of the Worldwide Church of God? Half the people in the audience raised their hands. And then Mr. Armstrong played it. He said, get them up higher. Now, if you're members of the Worldwide Church of God, put them up high, And so those that had their hands up, tweaky a little bit, they shoved them on up high. And others who didn't have their hand up at all, they looked around like, am I going to get left behind if I don't raise my... So they'd raise their hand. They'd raise it high. So, it went from half to three-fourths. But there's still a number who perhaps were older brethren who had heard Mr. Armstrong explain it back in 1956. And a recording of that is available, of 1956. I wish I could find a recording. All I can do is give you testimony, and there are others beside me who were there when Mr. Armstrong said that. The auditorium was full of people. And those who raised their hands, you remember that, because I'm sure some of you were embarrassed, as Mr. Armstrong said, those of you who have your hands up, put your hands down. None of you. And he was careful to look around to see if any of those who had their hands up were some of the evangelists or ministers who wouldn't be there, because most of them had assignments to speak somewhere else. But he was looking to see if any who didn't have a speaking assignment was in the audience who had at one time or another been on the board of directors. And what was there, 7? Somebody was telling me there were 7 this week. I thought it was 12. And in fact, Mr. Armstrong referenced 12. So you who mentioned 7 to me earlier this week, Mr. Armstrong said 12 is what I remember. But anyway, 7, 12 doesn't matter. If you were not ever on the board of directors, he said, you were never a member of the Worldwide Church of God. And you were not baptized into any denomination or any organization of men. You were baptized into the body of Jesus Christ, also known as the Church of God, as the Church of God, a spiritual organism, Mr. Armstrong emphasized. Did the closed caption thing get that correctly? A spiritual organism. Okay, come up a little higher. It got it. Okay, I pronounced it carefully. It got it. A spiritual organism. Okay, go up a little higher. A little higher. Okay, see, it got it. It got it again. That's not a business formation. That's not a business organization of any kind, be it corporation, LLC, sole proprietorship, or any other form of business that your governments allow and sometimes require for holding assets in a certain way. It's a spiritual organism, and it's not a building either. It's not a building, it's not an organization. Brethren, God clearly defines it as you and me, those of us who have God's Holy Spirit and who follow God's Holy Spirit, or who are led by it and follow it. That's the way Mr. Armstrong explained what is the body of Christ. It's made up of individual members who have and are led by and who follow God's Holy Spirit. That is what comprises the church of God, the temple, the spiritual temple that Christ is building to return to. That is, our Father, our Heavenly Father, is building for Christ, fitly framing us together. Now, are we fitly framed together when we're divided up into over 1,000, as the one minister is trying to tell me? Blankety blank, this and that Church of God groups, confusing the world, where God might want to call a few people here and there, and I've actually been chewed out by some who went through the entire 58-volume lesson Bible correspondence course, as if they think I have some kind of control over those who are doing that. Look, I'm the peon around here. I'm the last of the Mohicans into the ministry, and I certainly have no rank over most of those ministers who are doing that. So are they going to listen to me? Not very likely. I mean, they're, poof, get out of my face, get out of my hair. I've spoken to some, and some of them have told me things like this. Stephen, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I'm kind of like, don't we have the space? Do we not have the same spirit, the same mind? 1 Corinthians 1, verses 10 and 11. Are we operating by the same spirit? And if you're a minister, aren't you doing what God said do in Titus 1? Holding fast to what you were taught and teaching as you were taught. We were taught by God's end-time apostle, who only had the authority to put doctrine in the church. None of the rest of us put doctrine in the church. And what we teach can only be what God put in the church through his apostles, and especially his end-time apostle, who restored a lot of truths that had been lost, a lot of those truths being things that could only be understood in these latter days because they were designed and written for these last days. For example, a good example, and one that proves God's end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong was God's most faithful servant, as God defined servant in Revelation, saying that I reveal things to and through my servants to identify who my servants are. The prophecy in Revelation 17:10, which was written for the days, these last days, and during the prime days of God's end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong, that says, listen to this, Revelation 17:10. Then we'll go to Mr. Armstrong. Yeah, we need to. I need to do this in 1 minute and get to him so we can finish up in an hour and a half tonight, the usual time for Bible study. So look, you got me. I'm only going to be 1.5 minutes, and then boom, we're going to Mr. Armstrong. So I got to explain this quick. Revelation 17:10 says there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is. The Apostle John wrote that on the Isle of Patmos in 90 A.D., 400 some years plus before the first of those 7 kings had even been born, Justinian through Napoleon. And it says there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen. That's Justinian through Napoleon. Justinian, Charlemagne, Otto the Great, Charles V was the 4th, and Napoleon was the 5th, and 1 is. That 1 is was Mussolini between 1935 1936. Look at the grammar of that verse 10 of Revelation 17, and 1 is. That was written before they were born. So he's saying present tense. Now on the other side of it, you got to look at that as like a past perfect tense. It is only between 35 and 45. Now that is part of the was. And 6 are fallen. We're just looking at historical facts, and you have to understand that verse was written for present tense for God's end-time servant, Herbert Armstrong, who explained, who saw it. It was back page news. He's going to mention it. I listened to a whole bunch of his telecasts yesterday trying to find these animations that are in this wonderfully in this telecast tonight to show you how much destruction a hydrogen bomb on a missile can do. All right, I got to finish up in just a few seconds. One was Mussolini. God revealed that through his end-time apostle Herbert W. Armstrong. People, wake up! Some of you that are saying, la-di-da, Mr. Armstrong's in the grave. Well, you need to stay focused on his words because God is speaking through him as if he were still alive, and a lot of you haven't heard everything he had to say. And so instead of running off and listening to the wind here and the wind there, and who, la-di-da, this guy is doing this and this guy's doing that, poppycock, ignore them. Do what Christ said do in Luke 21:36. Watch and pray so that you can be accounted worthy to escape what you're going to see in this animation that's real. And the only way you're going to escape it, 1/3 of the people are going to be killed by direct hit, third by the fallout, the third that remain are going to be taken captive, not here in the States. They're going to be transferred over to the Holocaust museum buildings that have been kept like museums in Europe. Many of them will die in captivity, naked, gassed in gas chambers. They still have those available. Or they'll find some good way to shoot you. Kill you, murder you. And they'll and those who are left, and they're going to work you on the Sabbath. Even if you're not in that captivity, they're going to work you on the Sabbath and make you bow down before the image of the beast if you want the mark of the beast. And if you don't, they just flat out murder you. So you're not going to be protected where you are. You got to be taken to that place of protection. And the only way you're going to get there is by obeying the prerequisites Christ gave us in Luke 21:36 to be watching these first 4 seals that are active so you can avoid the 5th, 6th, and 7th seal. That's what Christ says. And so that you can stand before the Son of Man. If you're not qualified to escape, you're not qualified to stand before the Son of Man either. So some of you that are poo-pooing Christ's words, you need to get some certain things in your noggin. And I hope everybody will watch this and that this will put the proper kind of awe and respect for God in your hearts and the proper fear that'll make you want to watch and pray. Let's get to it. We got enough time for it if we get to it right now. So what I have to do is simply push this button. Wrong button. Push this button. That button's not doing what it's supposed to do. All right, I got another button over here we can push. Not that button. Let me see. Excuse me, brother. I'm sorry. I can push this button right here. All right, there it is. And take that button off and get this thing out of the way. And we can go right to Mr. Armstrong, get that off the screen. Some of these buttons are not working like they're supposed to. Get this off the screen. I'm going to put Mr. Armstrong's lower third up for a moment, and here he is. Ladies and gentlemen, brethren, friends, God's end-time apostle with this telecast on what 1 hydrogen bomb will do, what 15 will do to the nation of the United States, and the prophecies that surround those. And we're going to start right from the beginning with this music is not, we're fully licensed for this music, so right from the beginning, God's end-time apostle, Herbert W. Armstrong, with the opening to the world tomorrow. Here we go.
The World Tomorrow. The Worldwide Church of God presents The World Tomorrow with Herbert W. Armstrong. Ladies and gentlemen, Herbert W. Armstrong.
Nuclear war is definitely coming. Bible prophecies show that whole cities are going to be laid waste in our time. The August number of the Plain Truth magazine will cover carry a cover article, "Humanity Won't End in a Nuclear Holocaust." This article is going to show you the terrors of a nuclear holocaust, and it is coming, but there is also good news. Humanity won't end, and on beyond is going to come a real happy and peaceful world tomorrow that we've been proclaiming on this program for a long, long time. A former professor at Harvard University, now president of a society called Physicians for Social Responsibility, has said, quote, "We'll be lucky to survive the year of 1990. Survival is the only issue that counts now." I would like to give you a little bit of what will be the results of one hydrogen bomb. This and more too will appear in the August number of the Plain Truth in this cover article. In the first milliseconds after detonation, gamma radiation would kill everything within 6 miles. A fireball would consume everything within 280 square miles in 10 seconds, followed by a blast wave that would flatten the remaining structures within 4.5 miles. That would include skyscrapers and anything within 4.5 miles. Now further, fallout would be carried into water supplies through streams, lakes, and other sources, rendering drinking water unfit for use. In short, society as we know it today would be erased from this earth. As a matter of fact, enough hydrogen bombs could erase all human life from this earth, every man, woman, and child, including you and me. And Bible prophecy says such a war is definitely coming, but it also says that God Almighty in heaven is going to intervene and stop it. And there is good news on beyond. Now, the United States and the Soviet Union are not the only nuclear powers. We hear so much about the nuclear weapons of the United States and Soviet, and that's where the big race is. But also Britain and France, India, and the People's Republic of China all have the hydrogen bomb. And many smaller nations have nuclear weapons and will have the hydrogen bomb within, if they don't already have it, within a few more years. That includes at least 15 or 18 other smaller nations. Now that also is prophesied in the Bible, that smaller nations are going to be coming along. Let me give you a prophecy now from Joel, the 3rd chapter, and beginning with verse 9. This is a prophecy for our time now. "Proclaim ye among the Gentiles, prepare war. Wake up the mighty men. Let the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong." You know, I read this prophecy many, many years ago when I was up in Portland, Oregon, before I came to Pasadena to start Ambassador College. At that time, I saw whole trainloads of scrap iron going toward Portland, Oregon, where they were loaded on ships and shipped off to Japan. And I said at that time, I said, though all that metal is going to be melted and is going to come back on us, and it did in World War II. I saw this back before World War II, and those things did come, and they did beat the scrap iron going was the plowshares and the pruning hooks, and they were beaten into weapons of war, and it actually happened, and it's happening now again in a greater way. Continuing this prophecy, "Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen," that is, Gentile nations, "and gather yourselves together round about. Let the heathen be awakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I, God is speaking, I will sit to judge all the heathen round about. Now, verse 13, put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the press is full, and the vats overflow, for the wickedness is great in the world. Now you will find that also referred to in the 14th chapter and verse 15 of the book of Revelation, speaking of the time just before the coming of Christ, just before the final battle at Armageddon, which will be the final battle of World War III, just before the second coming of Christ. And it speaks there of the putting in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. It doesn't explain what is meant by that, but it does here. For the wickedness is great. And it is the greatness of wickedness that is now ripe. And God is going to reap all of it and cast it away. And a happier world and a world of peace, a world of happiness is going to come in a one-world government brought to this world by God Almighty. God is going to intervene supernaturally in world affairs. Affairs in this world have gotten to the place where man is unable to solve his own problems. One of our great news magazines in the United States said just a few years ago, it would seem now that the only hope of survival of humanity is the sudden appearance of an unseen strong hand from someplace. It's rather strange, but in a secular magazine, they seem to shy away from saying the hand of God. But it's very plain that that is what it is meant, that it's going to take intervention from God Almighty. Now, Jesus came prophesying this very thing when he was on earth 1900 years ago. You don't hear much preaching about that, but I'd like to turn to it. I want to show you just what the prophecies do say is going to happen, because this is going to affect your life and very dramatically. In the 24th chapter of Matthew, Jesus was answering his disciples who had asked him a couple of questions, and I want to come now to verses 21 and 22. For then shall be great tribulation. That is, time of world trouble, time of trial and test, terrible trouble, such as was not since there was a nation, since the beginning of the world to this same time, no nor ever shall be, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved alive. The word alive is not in the King James translation, but it isn't talking about spiritual salvation. It's talking about humanity being saved alive, and almost all other translations have it worded that way. And that is the meaning of the original language that Jesus used. But for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. God will intervene. Now then, that is going to happen shortly before the second coming of Christ, and that is what is going to cut it short, and the supernatural intervention of God. Drop on down to verse 29, the same chapter. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Supernatural powers, things that man doesn't cause. Man has been able to cause his troubles. Man has been able to cause all of the heartache and all of the suffering and all of the violence, but man can't solve his problems. God is going to have to intervene and do it to us and do it for us. Now the next verse. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, for then shall all the tribes or the nations of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. They will see him coming in the sky, in the clouds, with power and great glory, to rule all nations supernaturally. You know, there were full-page advertisements in certain large major city newspapers. I had copies of them from the New York Times and the London Times rather recently. A full-page advertisement saying that Christ has already come, but he hasn't shown himself yet, but he was going to appear before the end of the month of June, before July the 1st. Well, he hasn't appeared. And later there was some talk that I think appeared by the same people, whoever it was that put in such an advertisement, and there was no name to it. We didn't know who did it. Nevertheless, that he was hiding out in the slum areas of London. Well, after Jesus said that this thing is going to happen and that no flesh would be saved alive if God didn't supernaturally intervene in this time of trouble, and it is referring to hydrogen bombs because nothing else could obliterate all humanity, he said, "Then shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible they should deceive even the very elect." They won't be able to deceive the very elect. When Christ comes, all people are going to see him. Another prophecy says, every eye shall see him coming in power and great glory, descending down from a cloud in heaven. Now, I want you to notice the time of this prophecy. It's just before the coming of Christ, but it has to be the time after the hydrogen bomb had been produced, because nothing else could completely obliterate whole cities and a whole nation, because a few hydrogen bombs, well, suppose one hydrogen bomb should be dropped on New York, one on Boston, one on Washington, D.C., one on Philadelphia. Let's say one down in Miami, one on Houston, Texas, one on St. Louis, one on Chicago, one on Kansas City, one on Denver, one on Phoenix, Arizona, one on Los Angeles, one on San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle on the West Coast. What would be left of the United States? Those cities and all around them would be totally destroyed. There wouldn't be anything left. Now, I want to show you some of the prophecies that say that that very kind of thing is going to happen. The cities aren't mentioned, but I'm going to show you that our country is mentioned and the countries where it's going to happen. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 6, verse 6, "In all your dwelling places the cities shall be laid waste." That is referring, my friends, to the United States and Canada and Britain and our nations, the English-speaking nations. I'm going to offer you a booklet at the close of this program that shows you where we are mentioned in the Bible prophecies, and it's going to open your eyes. It's time we had our eyes open to these things, and that many people would blow the dust off of their Bibles and learn what the Bible does say and where our nations are specifically identified in the Bible. You won't find it under the name United States. You won't find it under the name Britain. That's our modern name. But you will find it there. And I'd like to send you the booklet, and there's no charge whatsoever. All you have to do is write for it. Now here again in verse 7. "And the slain shall fall in the midst of you, and you shall know that I am the Lord." That is a saying that is used in the prophecy of Ezekiel, by the prophet Ezekiel, again and again and again, and always it is referring to the time of the second coming of Christ. It shows that even the people of ancient Israel did not know who he was. They did not know that he was the eternal. They will know it when he comes, and they don't know it now. It is speaking of the second coming of Christ. Now I'd like to have you notice in the 12th chapter and verse 20 of Ezekiel, "And the cities that are inhabited shall be laid waste, and the land shall be desolate. And you shall know that I am the Lord," or the Eternal. And there again it's mentioned, once again, the time of the second coming of Christ. And all of this is a time of trouble such as never happened before and never will again, because world peace is coming from that time. God will intervene and stop that time, and then will come world peace. And we have never had world peace in 6,000 years. And there's a reason. It's the way we live. The way we live that is causing all of the trouble on this earth. Now you have the time. It's just before the coming of Christ. It's the time after the hydrogen bomb had been invented. And now I want you to notice something else back in Matthew 24. Let's turn back to that again. Matthew 24. And I want you to notice that Jesus had been at the beginning of this prophecy, and I've gone through it time and time again, and I have to go over it again to bring out a certain point right here in this connection. He had been in the temple in Jerusalem with his disciples. They had come outside, and he was showing them the buildings of the temple and telling them that the buildings of the temple were going to be put down, and a great time of trouble was coming, and a war, and one stone would not be left on another. Then a little later he was up on the Mount of Olives, and 3 of his disciples are mentioned in, I believe, the book of Luke, that came to him. And as we read in Matthew 24, they asked him, "Tell us, when shall these things be?" Now he was speaking about the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple that was built in Jerusalem. When shall these things be? And then they asked him another question. "And what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world?" They thought his coming and the end of the world, or the end of this age, this world, would happen in their lifetime. They didn't know it was going to be over 1900 years. But the destruction of the temple did come in their lifetime. And so Jesus talked first about that. And he said, Jesus answered and said unto them, "Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying that I am Christ, and shall deceive many." Now that is referring to many coming in his name, representing him, claiming to be the ministers of Christ, and saying that Jesus is the Christ, proclaiming Christ to the world. The fact that Jesus was the Christ, is the Christ, and yet deceiving the many. You know, Jesus said that many would even worship him, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men, and worship him all in vain. And he says here it'll be in vain. Now he went on with some other things, and then finally he came in verse 14 to the sign of his coming. "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end, as the end of this world, come." Now the gospel of the kingdom is the kingdom that he had proclaimed. He had proclaimed that gospel, and in a very few years that gospel was perverted, and they began teaching another gospel. And the gospel that Jesus had preached, the gospel of Christ, was suppressed, and men began preaching a gospel of men about Christ. But it was not Christ's own gospel. What was his gospel? In Mark 1 and verse 1, you read the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you read of the gospel in verses 14 and 15. Now after that John was put in prison, Jesus came into Galilee, preaching the gospel of the kingdom of God, and saying, "The time is fulfilled, and the kingdom of God is at hand. Repent ye and believe the gospel." Repent ye and believe the gospel. That was the gospel he preached. But, as I said a moment ago, in just a little over 20 years, they'd turned away from that gospel to another gospel. In 53 A.D., the Apostle Paul wrote his letter to the Galatians, or about 53 A.D., and Jesus had spoken these words in about the year of 30 or 31 A.D., and here Paul wrote in 53 A.D., "I marvel that you were so soon removed from him that called you into the grace of Christ unto another gospel." This he wrote to the churches in Galatia. Even the churches were turning to another gospel, which is not another, but there be some that trouble you and would pervert the gospel of Christ. So men began preaching their own gospel just about Christ. Just believe in Christ and you'll be saved. Just accept Christ. Just receive Christ and you'll be saved. You know, Jesus said there's a lot more to it than just that. That's part of it, all right. But there's a great deal more. And many believe Christ. He says, in vain do they worship me even, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. And that's what they've been doing, saying that the law of God is done away. The law of God is done away. Man's gospel about Christ. And so the churches turned to another gospel, and they became part of this world. And we come into what came to be traditional Christianity. As Jesus said, keeping your own traditions and making the law of God. And God's law is merely God's way of life. God's way of life is the way God lives. It's the way He set for us to live. You know, today we say that, well, we want every young person to grow up and choose his own way of life. Choose your own way of life, the way you want to live. And that seems to be the idea today, that anyone can just decide for himself how he wants to live and what his way of life is. God gave us a way of life, and to go contrary to that way is sin, and the wages of sin is death. And sin is the transgression of God's law, and that law is a spiritual law. Now, 1 John 3 and verse 4 says that sin is the transgression of the law. And in Romans 7, verses 12, 14, it says that the law is a spiritual law, not a physical law, a spiritual law. And it's the law of love, summed up in the great commandment of love to God and love to neighbor. And in the 10 commandments, the first 4 tell you how to love God, the last 6 how to love neighbor. That is God's basic way of life that will lead to happiness, would lead to peace. And people are not living that way, and so we're having troubles, and we're having heartaches, and we're having discouragements and discontent and frustrations and total unhappiness. And God is going to bring all of that to an end, and He's going to start another way of living and ruling of the whole world. Now, traditional Christianity is pictured, and I've been picturing it to you recently, in the book of Revelation in the 17th chapter. It came out of the old Babylonian mystery religion, and they took on the name of Christ and called it Christianity. And here in verse 5 you read, and upon her, this church's forehead, was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. The Babylonian mystery religion now become great, and she has daughter churches that came out of her in protest. It's about time that we consider that. Now, in the 18th chapter of Revelation, speaking of this Babylon, which is the traditional Christianity of this world, you read in verse 4, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, Babylon, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. And that time is right upon us and is coming very, very soon now. Now, I'd like to have you get some things that I have to send you. I can't go on talking about it forever on this program because I've run out of time. But I can send you a lot that I don't have time to say here. And there is a special book I've mentioned before. Many of you have not received it yet. The United States and Britain in Prophecy. Where are we mentioned in the Bible? Now, it not only tells you that, it tells you what is prophesied to happen to our people. And there is good news in it, believe me, the most wonderful good news that you ever read. But there also is a great warning of some bad news that's going to come first. You need to be forewarned. You need to know. Now, this is a complete book. It's profusely illustrated in full color, and it will open your eyes.
All right, friends, we're going to cut out right there because Mr. Armstrong is about to give an old address that apostates now own, and they don't want to send out the book. They don't want us publishing the address and a phone number. Same way they've kept the phone number, and they don't want to. You know, the only use for that number was for people ordering those books and that kind of thing, and they've kept that number because they don't want those books being distributed. But they're available. They're And not only are they available, and not that book in particular, you can find it all over the internet by doing a quick, easy internet search. Bing it, Google it, boom, all kind of hits for it will come up. You can look on our website, cogtv.org, go to our library menu. On the right side of our homepage, we've got menu buttons. Let's see, is that on the right side? As you look at that. No, I'm sorry, that's not. Well, yeah, as you look at it, it's on the right side. As you look at your screen, you'll find it on the right side, the menu. And you'll find one for library. And under library, there's an index to this. And on our archive video page, we actually went through that book in about 3 months, a little less than 3 months, on Friday nights and Sabbath mornings for 2 months in a row. We were going through chapter by chapter. We read it to you online. So if you don't like reading books and you want it, you know, you're spoiled by video and audio things, well, go to our archive video page, and once you find one of the listings for, let's see, what's this book, Mr. Armstrong? What's that book you offered? United States and Britain and Prophecy. Once you find one of the listings for the United States and Britain and Prophecy in our live Sabbath service streams, right in a row, you'll find 12 or 13 of them, where each one of the live stream broadcasts, we were spending an hour going through a chapter during that live stream. And then, so there'd be 7 or 8 or 10 weeks, all in one group, because we did them all at, week after week, night, Friday night, and Sabbath morning. We just kept going till we got through the whole book. That's in our archive. So if you look on our homepage at cogtv.org, I think Sabbath.tv may get you to the same place. I'm not sure. But if you go to cogtv.org, look for the menu on the right side of the screen. Look for archive video. You can then look under the big purple Sabbath service button. Look down through the listing. We've got 4 or 5 years worth of listings there, but it's very recent. It's been within the past few months. You won't have to go far down because they're chronological from the last live stream telecast to the first. So just go down a couple of 3 months worth, and you'll start to see, here's the United States and Britain and Prophecy thing. Now I realized we cut off earlier. I got us back on now. We got a green light, but this section of tonight's live stream is from the middle on. So at some point I'll probably delete this off because it's not contiguous. It's not from start to finish. If my recording comes out okay after we sign off, once in a while they corrupt, but if it comes out okay, within about a half hour to an hour after we end the live stream, in just a few minutes, I need to sign off. We're couple of minutes past an hour and a half, but I want to explain I'm aware that the live stream signal cut off tonight somewhere in the middle. And the whole contiguous stream will be in the archive. You can get that from the home page on one of the icon buttons about a half hour after we sign off, or you can go to our archive video page and find it there, and we'll also stick a link for Vimeo and YouTube where we'll archive it on the Sabbath service page on Facebook Live, so you'll know where to go get it if you want to watch this whole Friday night Bible study in one piece. Brethren, that's it. Got to sign off. We'll plan to be back for Sabbath service in the morning on the same Sabbath, the 29th day of the first month, the second Sabbath in the count to 7 Sabbaths during these Feast of Weeks toward Pentecost. Thanks for joining me tonight for this Friday night Bible study. Until the morning for Sabbath service, friends, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath, saying happy Sabbath, good Sabbath night sleep. Thank you very much for joining me here.